All right, hello everyone. It is fabulous to see this many of you at 11:30 in the morning on the Saturday of MAGFest. This is great. Thank you so much for coming out.
Or are some of you just on a late Friday night?
Yeah. It's Saturday. It's Saturday, really, I promise.
The extra credits panel didn't go that long. Right. So normally the extra credits panel goes till like 6, 7 in the morning. This time I actually said to everybody, okay, there's a panel I really care about like being lucid and awake for in the morning. So I'm going to go at 3. And then being MAGFest, I immediately walked out of the room, ran to friends I hadn't seen in 5 years, talked for 4 hours. Yeah. But here we are.
Listen.
So today's panel is the mechanics of love, but it's much more expansive than that. To me, the great project of the next generation of game designers is this idea that while for the past 25 years, we've been focused on sort of designing games that are fun. We always think about the word fun when we talk about games. And this idea of moving past fun, thinking about making games engaging, right? When we talk about other medium, when we talk about books or films or television or music, we don't just think about fun. Schindler's List is not a fun movie, I would hope. But it is engaging, right? It is something that you still want to watch. You went there because there was something in it that was compelling to you that you wanted to go and see and get through. I mean, Hamlet is not necessarily fun, but it's important to us, right? There's a reason that it survived centuries. So in games, we need to get past this word fun and find all the other ways that we can engage a human being. We don't really have tragedies or romances. We have on the fringes, right? We have a few of them, but we don't really have tragedies or romances or any of the other genres or other ways to engage a human being than just fun. And so today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to specifically talk about it in the context of sort of systems and mechanics and how we design around, how we create interactivity around things beyond fun, because we've seen some incredible examples of this, and I think that's probably where I'll start asking people about what examples they can think of. And I'm saying that out loud to you guys so that way everyone here knows and can think about it while I'm giving them time by saying more words. But I think we've had a few examples, but not many. And so the great thing is all of us up here are old, so we're gonna be like, here's the job of you guys that we screwed up for several decades, go solve. But we're gonna specifically talk about mechanics and systems and how we do more than just write words in our games that are something other than fun, but how we actually integrate it into the interactivity itself. So with that, do you guys all wanna introduce yourselves, and then you can answer what games you've seen that you feel like move beyond just fun to engage us in some other way?
Sure.
Go. Yeah, perfect, go.
Hi, I'm Charles Palmer from Harrisburg University, and about 7 minutes ago I was standing in the hallway and someone said, hey, come join this panel. My role at the university is I run the interactive media program. Prior to being there, I was also at Carnegie Mellon in the Entertainment Technology Center, and so my entire professional career has been education, but mostly geared towards creating interactive pieces.
We do have a lot to talk about. Hi, my name is Mike Sellers. I run the game design program at Indiana University. I've been there for about 3.5 years now. Was in the games industry for about 20 years before that. Biggest project I've been on was I was the lead designer on The Sims 2. I've done done a lot of MMOs and some free-to-play games as well. So I've been across the industry, except not so much on the console side. Have also done a lot of work on AI, and in particular, emotions in AI. And my real focus now is a systems design, systemic design, and just as a self-plug, I'll be giving a talk on that at 5:30 in one of these rooms. And so a lot of things that we just talked about, that James just talked about, are stuff that I'm going to be covering. Then I'll try to spoil some of it here.
My name is Luke Peterschmidt. I'm from the tabletop side. I've worked for him. I designed a game called Bakugan years ago, and one of my focuses right now is defining player types and who gets what kind of value out of games. And there's this, I love this panel because I want to talk about a very specific type of player who plays games for different reasons than I would translate fun into the drama of winning and losing, is where my entertainment value comes from, or my emotional response is where the entertainment.
Fascinating. Sorry, I got so distracted because immediately that's fascinating to me from a tabletop perspective, because for us, on the video game side, I think it goes a little past that, because sometimes we make fun out of big explosions and stuff, and so I like the vector that you have isolated by the drama of winning and losing, which is certainly one of the huge pillars of fun games that we create.
Yep.
All right. Oh, so you're not going to introduce yourself here.
Oh, I was going to do it last.
Oh, you're going to do last. Okay. Hi, I'm Sean Cashman. I'm assistant professor of communication at Pfeiffer University in North Carolina. I've written a couple of role-playing game books. I've studied and written about games. In particular, my area of interest is audience engagement. I love to talk about immersion in games, and so that's really where I am.
Hi everyone, my name is James Portnow. I am a game designer by trade. Several of you I see in this audience have heard this spiel 6 times so far at this conference, but I have worked on a bunch of games, AAAs and indies, ranging from Call of Duty to League of Legends. And in my spare time, I write a show called Extra Credits on the interwebs. All right, one other thing before we begin this panel, I kind of just want to also start by apologizing for the gender balance on this panel, because I actually think that one of the important things is going to be having more voices to move on and have new perspectives in order to deliver new games. And both of our non-male panelists had to cancel at the last minute. But I think it's really important. I think it's really important we just address that and get that out there out front, and the fact that that is a failing of this panel. But with that said, what games, since we started down there, we'll start down there this time. What games have you seen that you feel like go beyond fun?
Oh man, there's so many. But I'm going to list one that comes to my mind most readily, and that was Shadows of the Colossus. I feel that game went beyond fun in many ways because it is such an experience. You're basically in this desolate world where there's nobody, nothing. It's just you and your horse wandering around this large environment, and you actually begin to feel attached to the horse because it's like you're only a companion. And then towards the very end of the game, I'm going to give you a spoiler here, the horse falls off of a cliff.
No. Wait, what?
That's heart-wrenching. And so I feel that game, I think, really did a great job of going just a little bit beyond fun and creating an engaging, wonderful experience.
What are your I will go last because this one's actually more difficult if I go last, so I will also go last on this one.
There's a tabletop game out now called Fog of Love. It's a relationship simulator. You don't play yourself. You play a person in a relationship who has certain priorities that are very real sounding, and you have to negotiate with your partner. It is a game that you can win. So you may have to have a discussion about, should we go out to a movie? And you're like, I don't know. I want to be the dominant person in this relationship because my card tells me to be the dominant person in this relationship. And you made the suggestion, not me, so no. But if you do that too much, you break up. And it is a really interesting game from the fact that the people who play it are getting something very different out of it than the people who play a very competitive head-to-head game.
So at the risk of being greedy, I'm going to bring up a few really quickly. The easy one, Portal. The rumor, I don't know how true this is, but I love the rumor. The reason that, and spoilers, I apologize. The reason that you have to get rid of the companion cube on level 17 is because Steven Spielberg said games will be art when something on level 17 makes you cry. And so it's like, do I push the companion cube? Oh, gee, all right. The Grizzled is a tabletop game that is definitely engaging. I wouldn't say it's necessarily fun. It's essentially a game about PTSD in wartime. Really incredible experience. And then I think it'd be remiss without mentioning Brendan Romero's game Train, not a commercial game, but a game where you load up little yellow pegs on a train car, or on train cars to try to get them to their destination. And only as you play the game do you realize you have been complicit the entire time in taking Jews to a death camp. And it's the reaction of the players that makes, quote unquote, the game. Definitely a game that is engaging, but not one that's fun.
And I think after we go over this, I would love to talk a little bit more about Train because it breaks so many of the traditional rules of game design
Yeah.
in order to do that. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Wow. So I got a real answer and a cheat answer.
All right.
I think life is strange for me.
Yeah.
Right. Life is strange.
For me.
The first one I
qualification.
thought was so different from what I was used to playing and engaging in, right? And I thought the story that was happening there, a lot of people reacted to it very quickly, and I thought that was powerful for keeping it along. My cheat answer is Skyrim, but not for the obvious reasons. There's lots of fun in that game, but I personally found the attachment to certain characters in the game overshadowed that. And I'll give you my only example, my real example. Lydia died for me.
Sorry.
What did I do? I spent 3 hours going back into previous saves and playing up to the point where she was alive again, right? And that experience for me, I tell this to my students all the time, that experience was different than what someone designed to happen. But for me, it was more engaging than the actual designed activities that took place.
That's funny. Fallout for me, I never let the dog die. Like
Yep.
ever. Like it's not only that I don't resurrect the dog, like literally I will reset if the dog dies. But mine is probably this War of Mine.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's an interesting example because it takes some of the survival zombie mechanics and says, okay, what does this say metaphorically? How can we use this and how can we modify mechanics that we weren't thinking about very much to get the audience to really think about them and to consider something, the idea of being a civilian in a war zone that they otherwise might not have really spent a lot of time thinking about. And so in each of these, I'm glad we have so many radically different examples. I kind of actually want to start with Train because for those of you who don't know, Train's an installation piece. It's almost entirely played at art galleries. How many of you guys know of the game Train? Okay, yeah, so we should actually talk about this.
I have a slide on this later today, so.
Yes, I might have to come to this. So the fascinating thing about Train is the rules are very vague, right? It says you're trying to get effectively as many people on this little train car as possible. And you'll find people who end up stacking them sideways and mashing them into, like fitting them into this car however they can. And it's only very late in the game that you flip over a card as you go to a train station and realize you've just flipped over a card and the train station you've gotten to says Auschwitz, right? And what's really powerful about it is the only reason you're doing any of these things is because a set of rules says do these things, right? Which is the fundamental Nazi experience, right? You were just following a group of rules because that's what the rules said without actually considering the meaning or ramifications of those rules. And you just did it, right? Because you were in a context which says you should follow the rules. It's a game about thinking about when to break the rules, and the rules are vague. They don't actually say winning condition, they don't say any of this other stuff. They just say stuff to do within the game. And that's what's so powerful, this examination. But of course, by being so vague as a rule set, by not really dressing winning conditions, they break a lot of the traditional rules of game design. And that allows us to have that moment when you talked about the reactions. People are horrified. There's this moment of sudden realization, and people actually look at the table, and the table it's played on is built on top of and into sort of an old World War II Nazi typewriter. And when you look close at it, you realize it has the swastika keys, right? Like, because they had a key for that on their typewriter. And you realize that if you had just been looking closely, you would have realized what you were participating in all along.
Well, the bed of the game is built on sort of on top of a box, and the bottom of it is a bunch of broken glass.
Yes.
Which you kind of don't realize at first. And Brenda Romero, the person who designed this, has said things like a few people who have played the game, like she said, one guy would not leave the table until every last peg was taken out of every last car. And some people have tried to subvert the design and like crash the trains and things once they figure out what's going on. But it's, sorry.
No, that was perfect. I was nodding in agreement.
No.
Like,
Are we entering a jazz era where you must know the rules so you can break them?
so that's what I'm wondering. One of the things I was wondering is, are we now able to do this because our audience is more informed and has a better sense of sort of the fundamentals of game and has more game literacy, so they're actually able to sort of participate in these new forms? Did we need, and I guess we can just start there, did we need the past 25 years of focusing on fun to get to a point where we could express other things? Or is this just a failing on all our parts?
I would say yes, we needed to do the other things first. I think also there are lots of academic programs across the country that start off with the idea of, okay, what you know as being entertaining for an audience, that's easy. Don't do that. Let's push ourselves into doing something different. Let's get out of the comfort zone that we know of, oh, I pick up the gun.
Right.
I smash in the door, and let's say that, no, we can't do that. Let's create a game, and James, you'll know the example. Let's create a game where player one is afraid of player two, and player two has to help them overcome that. Start there instead of starting with the hack and slash or whatever it is, the dungeon crawl.
I saw an analysis recently, and I can't recall where, but talking about naive, sophisticated, and decadent audiences, where a naive audience is you come to it, you don't know the forms. I saw my first opera not that long ago. I'm like, oh, this is what opera is. I'm completely naive about it. Once you've seen a few operas or a few movies, you become sophisticated, and you start understanding the form and what's going to happen. You understand what's happening in a romantic comedy. You understand where things are going to go in an action movie, but you want to see how they get there. And then a decadent audience is, I don't like the term particularly, but it's one where you understand the tropes well enough that you want to see them inverted. In movies, Sixth Sense is a good example of this. We all know what a cut means in a movie, and yet in that movie they used it to subvert the form. Duchamp's fountain in art. There's lots and lots of examples where you're inverting the form. I think now we're at the place where we have a lot of sophisticated audiences, a whole bunch of naive audiences, people who play Candy Crush and say, "Oh, I don't play games," is really interesting to me. And then a few, I think the sort of the leading edge and where I think we're going in a lot of ways is saying, what can we do to subvert these forms, which I think is a healthy thing for any art form.
You have thoughts?
I think one of the challenges for tabletop is that most of our games are multiplayer games, and we have a small audience of decadents, of people who want to see things subverted. They might be the only person at the table who wants that. So one of the challenges you have as a tabletop gamer is designing a single game that can appeal creatively to more than one audience. I designed a game as a mechanic test a while back called the Miskatonic School for Girls. It's a deck building game that you play backwards. For those of you who know deck building games, you have a small deck, you build it, it gets better and better and better, like almost every game. You get better and better and better at the game, and then you see if you win. In this game, your deck is never better than turn one because I build your deck. So your deck falls apart on you. I did it as a mechanic study with no brand on it. Then I saw the emotional response, and I said, this is a game about losing your mental faculties. Because it feels like the deck kills you. I put the cards in your deck. It was me. But the emotional response, because there's a delay between cause and effect. I put it in your deck, it comes up 3 turns later. It feels like I lost this game because it was random. This game was random. I'm like, no, I put the card in your deck. So I had to try to put the right brand on to match the emotions that was coming from the mechanics. And I will tell you, the professional game review cadre of people hate this game because they review based on classic fun.
I want to play this game.
Plug. He will not plug it. I will. Find the game and play it.
It's my best-selling game. It's my best-selling game. The Miskatonic School for Girls. If you play it because you love deck builders like Dominion, just don't play it. I spent 20 minutes at PAX Tabletop trying to convince someone not to buy my game because I didn't think they were going to have fun with it.
Well, I mean, this is not a challenge unique to games. This is a challenge that's unique to, I think, most media. In that you've got multiple audiences that you have to appeal to. You have to make it simple enough so that the general audience can come in and go, okay, that was fun, but it's layered enough so that an audience that has a more literacy can walk in and go, oh, I understand why that element's in there, even if it just goes right past the head of the 4-year-old sitting next to you is going, I like the kid.
I have some idea of what films you're speaking of. I think that it didn't need to take this long. I think that some of it is on us. Some of it's on the fact that the way we talk about it in media, right? A 7 out of 10 game score, right, makes it very difficult to. It's much harder to pin a score on something outside of the traditional, easily quantified categories, most of which directly sort of correlate towards fun, like how good the graphics are, right?
Quick example, I mentioned Portal already. One of the things is sort of the quantum of innovation. Portal's a shooter.
Yes.
It uses all the tropes of shooters except you're not killing anybody. And it does some interesting, portals are actually a technical thing in 3D engines, and that's what's happening when you make the elliptical hole. all they did was to take that one thing and say, oh, we're gonna have everything about a shooter except you're not killing somebody. That's this one little notch of change. And if that much of a change, along with great graphics, interesting puzzles, things like that, but all that was already there, that one little bit of a change makes that big of a difference. So that tells me is we're not doing enough change.
Well, and one of the things that's fascinating, why I grabbed a bunch of people from universities, is because that came from students.
You're right, yeah.
Like, Nervacular Drop
yeah.
was the original Portal game, and Valve folks were wandering around a university, and they saw this game, and they hired the whole team, right? And it came out of a non-traditional place, and that's what I mean by I think it's taken us a little bit too long. I think as a AAA industry, we played it a little bit safe. Our traditional reviews are just that, right? They're reviews. They're not analysis. And I think we do need to have a stronger conversation around the meaning of some of these things. And before we can put metaphor in games, right, we need to have people analyzing
I would push back a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
And I don't think it took too long. If you look at all the other art forms and how long it took to move from something for the masses to something for the masters.
Well, and I would argue that
impatient.
we have
Yeah,
all
we
the
are impatient now, yes.
well, we have all the other art forms, right? Like it's taken less and less time per art form. Like film, clearly less than literature. Television, less than film, right? We can look back and see those and say, okay, here's the evolution. And I would only say that from the AAA side, I've seen us hide behind, oh, we're only making games, right? I've always seen us say, oh, these are just a fun pastime.
Because it's a company.
Right.
Right, there's a profit involved.
They have to make a profit. They have to go with what sells and what they know is a safe bet. Whereas the independent games, they have a little more freedom to push the boundaries.
But to push this, it'd be great to see something, I don't know, you could call it extra analysis, say.
No, I don't think anyone would watch it. I've been told by YouTube.
7 out of 10.
Right, there you go. But I mean, and that is part of it. That's part of actually why we started Extra Credits, was to have this dialogue with all of you where literally I said to Dan early on, we're never going to get to make better games unless people demand better games. So we better start talking to people about how we make games, not because we're the right people to do it, but just because at the time nobody was doing it. Nobody was talking about it, because for some reason it was a mystic secret. The secret was we have no idea and we're terrible at it.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
I've let out the secret, oh no.
So I want to make one more quick
Yeah.
comment that we have a lot of heavy things we've talked about that games could talk about. There's a lot of joyful emotions that are not based on fun and drama that we could also communicate through games.
Yes.
And the shortcut is story. Make really compelling characters that you care about. The dog, the horse that you. I hope you got to name the horse in that game, because that just makes it worse.
You don't. You don't even know the name of the character you're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have some tools at our disposal in the near future that are amazing for this, if you're willing to give up a lot of your privacy. Like if you're willing to give up some privacy and then you play a game where the person who gets kidnapped looks like your grandmother, and the dog that you won't let die looks like your dog because it's on your Facebook feed and it's pulling pictures of your dog and putting it in the game. Wow,
the same breed.
emotional impact.
But there's low-hanging fruit there. I mean,
Yeah.
in Knights of the Old Republic, when this is how long ago that game came
Yeah.
out? I mean, but when Bastila broke up with me, suddenly I was in 7th grade again. Like, she broke up with me?
Yeah.
And I'm wandering around the house going, wait, and like trying to analyze my own thinking, you know? It's
Why
just-
do I feel this way?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you have this relationship. I figured it's going to be this straight ramp. Then she's going to be put in peril, and you rescue her, and that'll be the game. The relationship goes up, and she's just no. We have to keep this professional. I'm like, wait, what? And that was, I mean, talk about low hanging fruit, but it was very effective. So, and we haven't done a lot more of that since then. Well, some, but not a lot.
And so for a moment, I want to break off and go back, because I think these are really interesting examples, and I think where we've had the most success in some of these narrative examples, and the narrative examples are great because for the most part they subvert exactly the ideas that have been planted in us from games, from playing so many games. What you just said about, oh, I know how this game relationship is going to go. I'm going to meet the girl, say the right options to get the girl because prize. The girl is going to be imperiled, and then I will be the hero and save the girl, right? And as soon as we take that away, because that's been the trope for so long, it is impactful. And we understand how to do that in narrative because we're borrowing it more from another medium. But what are mechanics or systems you've seen that have inherently left you with a moment where you've just sort of put down the controller and been like, wait, what am I doing, right? What does this mean? I can buy a little bit of time. It's actually not. There are other examples I want to talk about more, but one of the most interesting ones. How many of you guys know an iPad game called Fingal? Right? Nobody. Oh, one person. Excellent. Well done. It's super weird, but what it is it's a 2-player game, and it's really simple. There are a couple of boxes on the screen, and you're told to like move them around to specific places. But 3 of the boxes are colored white, 3 of the boxes are colored yellow. One player plays each set of boxes, and in the end, your hands get tangled. And it's a game functionally about flirting. It's about the tactile effect of playing a game. They're the only game I've ever seen that thinks about what you're actually doing on an iPad and says, you know what's an interesting human experience? A human experience that's engaging? This moment when your fingers touch, right? And they capture that. I mean, it's functionally Twister for the iPad, but substantially less awkward.
What's it called?
Fingal. But it was just such genius design because they were thinking about the actual device they were working on. And instead of saying, take what we know from games, they were like, how do I encapsulate an experience that was magical for me at some point, right? Because we've all had that point where for the first time your hand brushed against somebody else's hand you like, or the first time you took their hand, and it's one of the most engaging moments in life, period, right? And so that was something where I thought was like, wow, you guys mechanically encapsulated that. Instead of telling me about this romance, you made me sort of participate in it a little bit. And then, of course, there's all sorts of awkward moments that come out of that, too, which was great. But other thoughts in terms of mechanically what we've seen this
Yeah,
time?
I mean, Guitar Hero, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Guitar Hero was life-changing for me. It was like, oh my gosh, this is in my genre, it's my game, it's my thing, it's my jam, and I don't care about my points. I don't. You score them, I think, right? Somewhere there's points. I don't care. I just wanted to stand in front of my TV like an idiot with a toy. It was awesome.
I'll give you a good one too, Braid. Particularly its mechanic of time and how the character moves back and forth in time. The final level of the game, you go through the final level and then you go through it backwards. And going through it backwards gives you an entirely different feel for what's going on. Going forward, you're trying to save the princess. Going backwards, she's trying to stop you. And that made me think.
I want to go back to Guitar Hero for just a second. A slightly different, wonderful experience with it, which is that I'm not a musician at all. And I played this with 3 other people who were all musicians. They put me on bass, which is the right thing to do. Stand there and don't break anything. And it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing social experience. These are all friends of mine, all game developers. But hearing somebody really kill it on lead guitar, and the singer was amazing. And it was a phenomenal experience that I could not have had any other way.
Yeah.
It was just transcendent almost, really, for me.
And that's incredible because before I went to games, I came from a music background, and that moment is one of the most powerful that I've had in life. And the other thing that I find fascinating is I've run into so many young people who have picked up a guitar because of Guitar Hero, and I met so many people who were introduced to music that long after they stopped playing the game, they were still listening to those tracks because they found music they loved through the inclusion of our medium, right?
Yeah.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on games that
Not good ones.
not good is okay?
There's
Bennett Foddy?
There are a number of tabletop games that were more about the people around the table and the experiences that was created for them. And it's funny because there were games that I played and I absolutely loved, and then years later I come back and say, oh, that was eh. And then I realized it really wasn't the game.
Right.
It was the Settlers is a perfect example. Love the game Settlers, but I realized I really loved the friends that I was playing Settlers with regularly. And now when I play with other people and I say, oh, you're the sheep lord, they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, oh, that's right, you don't get it, right? And it's that thing that I think is interesting. Yeah.
It's funny because I actually went to the ETC because over a game of Settlers, a friend told me about the program. I think that on all of these, I mean, God, there's so many. To me, one of the most interesting ones is Minecraft, right? Minecraft doesn't have any of what we would traditionally call fun in the AAA. I mean, there's a reason that there wasn't a AAA Minecraft. It wasn't a technical reason that we couldn't build Minecraft until 10 years ago, right? that is a game that is engaging on a whole spectrum of levels that are just about raw creativity, right? Here are the mechanics of creativity. Let me give you Legos, which people love to tinker around with, and let me combine them with like basic programming, which people love to tinker around with, and say, here's just a world, build your own thing, go nuts, right? And so creativity is another area outside of just raw fun, outside of even some of the other areas that other mediums might be very strong in, that we can deliver on some of these emotions. God, I was just thinking of another one too. I kind of want to go to the audience and see what everybody else has as far as experiences that you guys have.
Just before we do that, can I throw out, I don't know if this works or not because no one else has seen these. These are prototypes I have, but this is an area that I've poked at for a long time. Interesting you mentioned Fingal because I have a prototype which I think works, and I think I need to get back to it and make it actually work. It's a challenge I set for myself many years ago. My daughter was like 13. We were talking about boys and things like that. Anyway, I wanted to make a game about sex that she could play and not go, oh, that's kind of weird. And what I went back to was an old Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers dance. I don't remember which movie it is, but anyway, they're dancing. And I saw this movie first when I was like 12, and then I saw it again in my mid-20s. And they're dancing, and at the end of it, he twirls her out, and she twirls and twirls and twirls, and ends up back on this chase lounge. And he comes up to her and goes, cigarette? And at 12, I'm like, well, dance number, you know? And at 25, I'm like, oh. I understand what happened there. And so I thought, is that doable? And I think it is. I have a tablet prototype for a game that is all about the interactions you have from initial contact through flirting into sex that doesn't look like anything except it doesn't look like a dance number either, but it has that same sort of resonance. So that's, but I bring it up only because I haven't seen anything else like that. And I wonder, is it just really hard to do, or are we just not doing it yet?
Well, so this is one of the fascinating things. We almost never use the language of metaphor in games, right? It's surprising how, if you look at like 90% of their games, they are what they are on the surface, right?
Right.
We very rarely get Spec Ops. We rarely get so many of these other things. And actually, it's funny, I joked about it, but on the other hand, I think Getting Over It with Manafati is actually an excellent example of exactly this. That game is not fun, but you want to do it. It's engaging. It's as engaging as it can be. And then it realizes why it's not fun, right? And it's talking about these frustrations and our desire to participate in these things and our need for overcoming difficult things, right? And as such, because it understands the metaphor that its mechanics are saying, it's able to deliver that to us in a way that we otherwise can't. So I think that's a powerful thing. But I did want to get to, I know we have still some time, so I did want to get to both questions and any examples you have. Over there. Yeah.
So from a tabletop game perspective, I wouldn't say it's quite as philosophical or anything like that, but there's a tabletop game that I run called Exalted, and one of my main issues with something like D&D is that it doesn't give nearly enough weight to the capacity for social interaction, and what really struck me about Exalted is that when you look on the character sheet, yes, you have like your stats, your abilities, your powers, but there's also a section for intimacies, which are where you have to explicitly state what your character cares about and what they believe. And it struck me because it's on the same page as like your defense and your attacks. And it gave me the impression, and the mechanics turned out to follow through on this, it gives the feeling that your character's emotions and goals are just as important as their capacity to affect the world.
And you have to tend to them too, otherwise they fade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Role-playing games have a leg up on this one because they're all about your creativity. Yeah.
All the way in the back over there.
You mentioned an iPad game that had you physically interacting with other players' fingers. You should check out the indie space. There's a game that is actually like Twister, but with an iPad. You can play with up to like 8 players, at least 3. You put your finger in a circle, and the circle rotates, so you're getting all tangled, and you have your fingers moving around.
I'll have to check that out. The indie space, by the way, I'll just pitch to everyone. You should all go check out the indie space because a lot of this exploration is happening right there. I love the idea. There's a game called Nothing Good Can Come of This, which, right, it's hilarious, and then you realize, what is it about? I drop a bullet and a gun into a room with two people, and you're like, oh, actually, that's every multiplayer game I've almost ever played. Oh. But yes, right there in the front.
So, actually, on the similar note to what he was talking about, LARPs, how do you approach topics like romance and intimacy, both in a way that is safe and also separates players and characters enough to help manage bleed?
So we had the perfect panelist for this. If you go down to the LARP room and talk to either of the people running the LARP room this year, they both have a lot of thoughts on specifically this, so I almost don't want to answer, but one of the things I thought was really interesting is to actually remove mechanics from those moments, because having success or failure rolls effectively, I mean, not, since you're not actually rolling LARP, but you know what I mean, removing the rolls from that, because that's something which in a live action situation with another real human being, we can't have dependent on the dice, and you just have to enable a space where people are able to explore parts of themselves that they otherwise might not. They have to be able to take on that character and say, in this space without the dice compelling me to do so, I'm okay failing at a romance, I'm okay exploring a romance I otherwise normally don't think of myself exploring in the real world.
Can I give an experience example of that really quickly? I know a woman, Josephine Westfold in Sweden, who runs a company that does LARPs. And they do regular LARPs, but they also do LARPs for like police departments. They did one in a school about peer pressure. They didn't say it was about peer pressure. They came in and they said, we know one of you told. These kids had no idea what was going on until they eventually figured out they were all secret agents, and one of them was a traitor, but none of them were traitors, but they had to live up to the peer pressure of not giving it. Anyway, she told a story about how she was doing a quasi-Harry Potter LARP. Essentially, it was Harry Potter, but they couldn't use those terms. Anyway, she was playing the Hermione character, and another guy was playing the Draco Malfoy character, and the situation, which just kind of happened, LARPs are really, I mean, role-playing games have this, but this is like turn to 11. He cast a truth spell on her, and she cast a truth spell on him and said, who do you want to take to the winter formal? And he said, well, you. And so this guy, being good enough at improv, did the same thing, cast a truth spell on her and said, who do you want to take to the winter formal? And she said, well, you. And so now they had this Hermione Draco romance line that was not in the original LARP at all that took off and was incredibly effective. And I mean, I think that's the kind of thing, when you allow yourself to do that, whether it's in a Settlers game or a role-playing game or a LARP, it is just unparalleled.
The only thing I want to add to this, whether it's in LARPs, and especially in LARPs, but even as we explore some of these things, we also have to be cognizant of the effect we're having on the player and the potential negative effects.
Definitely, yeah.
Like these all have to be safe places
Yes.
to explore these things. And I've heard developers talk about just trying to put players through trauma. That's not actually what we want to do with our games.
She also talked about one where there was a castle that was haunted, and you could put a sign on your door at night that says, I'm done for the night, or please, I'm open to being haunted.
That's awesome.
I mean, there has to be a willingness to join into it. Otherwise, you end up with a Sophie's Choice kind of situation.
But yeah, over there.
So I want to piggyback on that, though, is that sometimes I run into issues with social mechanics specifically, where they have to be in place because you might have a player that really wants to have these big emotional moments, but if they're trying to play like a confident person and they're not personally confident, they kind of fall back on the mechanics until they can build that own confidence. So when you're talking about pulling the mechanics out of, getting it out of the way, doesn't that therefore hinder people that are not as able to be socially open as others?
So up until the moment, so the mechanics of saying, of casting the truth spell on this person is great, and that's what enabled this moment to happen. But what they said after that truth spell, there was no role for, is it me, right? And that's the part that, it's just that final step where they have to be safe to be able to make those choices or back off from those choices. So I think that the mechanical framework is what helps people take on those roles, and you're absolutely right. It's just that last space where we can't have dice compel people to do something that puts them in a very uncomfortable place. that we want to make sure we sort of avoid or allow outs for when developing new systems, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, rules are permissive. They tell you what you can do in a game and what you must do in a game.
Yeah.
So my classic example here is the Cards Against Humanities, right, is a game that gives you permission to say a bunch of horrible things you would never normally say. You know that going into the game. If they're not going to make you play the game, but if you're playing the game, you do.
Well, no, but that's actually a really good point, is that when I play Cards Against Humanity with my friends, we all are like, okay, what are our trigger lists? And we pull cards
Yeah.
out.
Absolutely, well done.
So it kind of seems like what you're saying here is that kind of that same thing, of establish the framework, but then have a specifically established moment of when to pull those rules out, and that's just the natural interaction happens.
Yes, exactly. You put it better than I did. Yes,
You do.
absolutely.
Well done.
Well, there's a reason why in Dungeons and Dragons charm spells fail 90% of the time.
The only person who knew about Fingal.
Hey, so I wanted to mention Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Yes, good. I was going to talk about
Yes.
this.
Oh, it's a good one.
For people who may not be familiar with it, it starts out looking like a regular fun game. Simple MacGuffin chase. The story is so simple that the voice lines and the cutscenes are all gibberish because you don't need actual lines. But towards the end of the game, you find out that the fun mechanics you've been doing, because the mechanics for controlling the characters is different from any other game, is actually set you up for one of the biggest gut punch feels in gaming.
So without spoiling it, the controls are, you've got two different brothers, and you're controlling both simultaneously, so it's a single player, two character game, where your left hand is controlling one character and your right hand is controlling another one, and it becomes really interesting because at first it's super awkward, but then it really does evoke this sort of weird, if you have a sibling, this weird just automatic interaction where it is sort of like two halves of your body, and that sets up this moment going further in. Up there in the front.
So I was actually, I forgot what I was waiting.
That's okay. I was actually calling on you right there.
Well done.
The other front.
So I wanted to talk about that very game without spoiling it. I assume most of you know like what happened.
Yes.
Yes.
So this was the most powerful moment I've ever had in a game because I was playing it with my best friend. It was not a single player
Oh.
experience. We were controlling the different people.
Oh, wow.
And that was a doozy.
That's awesome. But if you haven't played it, like we were clearly talking about it, it is worth playing. It's super awkward when you first start it. The controls feel terrible.
Wrong. They
Right.
just
Yeah, yeah.
feel wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's weird, if you read the reviews on it, almost all the reviews were like 6 out of 10, the controls are too awkward. And it's like, oh,
I played for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I had to beat this in 2 hours in the office with 17 people around. But all right, right back there. Yes.
Actually, it's kind of a weird goofy game that we actually just played last night, but have you ever heard of like the Fruits Basket card game?
Oh, I haven't played the first basket card game.
There's, the way the mana works, it's an optional mode, but one of the costs of playing a mana is at the bottom of every card, there's a question that you have to answer. And it sounds simple, but they're like really deep and personal, like, who's the person do you trust the most? Did they trust you? Or like,
Wow.
we were playing, and somebody actually avoided playing a card that would have been advantageous for them, or like gave somebody else a disadvantage because they didn't want to say what was on the card.
Can I mention, just riffing off of that for a second, just, this is not a game thing, but to tell you that how powerful that is. There's a psychologist in England who came up with this thing where if you go through an interview where you with another person, where you sit and you talk for about 2 hours, and you ask increasingly intimate questions, and you can call it off at any moment. And then you stare into their eyes for, I think it's 7 minutes, and you stare into each other's eyes, and you will fall in love. And a woman set out to say, well, this is crap, this is stupid, and so she reported, and so she found some guy and went out and did this, and they ended up getting married. And it really works, and there's a bunch of reasons why. One of the reasons is your brain is both your brains are releasing oxytocin and building this social bond. But things like that are actually really, really powerful. And I think that we're just now getting to the point where this game, getting to the point where we can start fooling around with things like that. Hopefully not fooling around with fire. But
This game also came out like 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Wow.
Oh man, wow.
I mean, coming from a communication perspective, and I like your example there of falling in love, one thing we know is that a key aspect of attachment is disclosure. So the more someone knows about you, the more you know about them, the closer you will feel to each other. Disclosure is the act of communicating information about yourself. I am not aware of a game that actually takes advantage of this, in the sense that it's asking information about you and is able to use that information to engage you. Can you guys think of one?
I pitched one a few years ago, and it went down in flames.
It went down in flames.
Because no one wants that.
No one wants that.
Would you rather is essentially sort of
Yeah.
that as a
Never have I ever, yeah.
So it's funny because it's so simple, but how many of you guys have played Earthbound? Do you remember the moment at the prey moment, which is just an incredible moment for doing this by giving you a mechanic that's functionally useless throughout the entire game, but the metaphor is very clear, and then you need it at the end when all other hope is lost. You use this one useless thing that you've had just sitting around forever, and then you get to see everyone's memories of you, and you like realize that you can push back this darkness, which was amazing. But also, do you guys remember you input your name at the very beginning of the game, like your actual like sort of real name, and they never use it, right? It's your name is Ness. And then right at the end, they pull it out, and then all of a sudden they're referring to you, the player, even if it's just by your handle, right? They're referring to you, the player, in a game that's never done it before. And by having that one little piece of information about me, and when these characters are calling on me personally to not make their world terrible, you're just like, whoa, I am in control. These people's lives have been in my hands. I've done horrible things to these people.
You know, what I really like about that Fruit Basket game is it's not a single player experience, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we played it with 5 people.
yeah, so most games that can do this become narratively based, single player experiences, right? And a lot of the modern games are about large player bases,
Yeah.
right? And that's a whole other challenge. Like there's this game, Legend of the Five Rings. There's a really good job of making me care even if I'm not playing, which is a thing. And but it's a joint narrative trick, right? But that's interesting. I like that because it's more than one person being told here's a story. Because games are at some part about control. Like I have agency in the game. Usually, I'm doing a thing, and then you mix that agency with impact, with what they want to tell you the story.
So I think that this is one of the areas where every time we say games are about, we now have to reconsider, right? Because games have been about control. I actually think that the removal of control, I mean, even with
input is probably a better word.
Sure, but like BioShock is always the quintessential example to me where you have control, you have agency, you have input, and then you don't. At the moment where you want it most, suddenly this is the one cutscene, right? We take away all agency, and you realize what that feels like. And so I think we as designers have to pause and reflect every time we say the words, because like you're right, 98% of the time, even with these games are going to be about control, but games are not about control in the same way that we wouldn't say literature is about X, right? I mean, we can even say like literature is not about grammar, right? But yeah, hand back there. I've seen your hand up for, yes, perfect.
Speaking of literature and control, how many of you played a little game called Doki Doki Literature?
That was, this
Wow.
is, so, so for any of you guys who don't know, yesterday it came up on the panel, the Extra panel, our Halloween episode came out. I had written it, and the script I had written a week before Doki Doki Literature Club came out, so it wasn't on our Halloween games you might not have tried. And so now every week somebody stumbles across that video and writes us, hey, have you guys heard of Doki Doki Literature Club? But yes, absolutely, right? And there's another subversion of expectations, right? They take all the tropes of what you think the genre is you're playing and go, how about no, right?
Right. And what happens is there's like this compact like window of 5 minutes where like your expectation just gets dropped. And then to avoid spoilers, at that moment you think that you can do something to like explore more of it, and then the game takes that away from you. And the game forces you into something that you didn't want to do at first. It seems like that like restarts.
Yeah.
But this is cool because I don't think we should go necessarily into more spoilers, but this is really good the way you're talking about it, because right there is an example, right, where we think it's about agency, And then there's this moment, everything I've learned as a game designer, right? What's the most quintessential part of games? Interactivity, right? And then boom, the taking away of my interactivity made that experience. Because Doki Doki Literature Club is about that, right? And the realization that they could do that made it super powerful.
And one of the most interesting things that did to me was I'm not a fan of horror games, but because of how the game pulled the rug on me, it made me engage. Like I have to finish it despite it throwing the kitchen sink at me.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, it wasn't necessarily fun that engaged you, but that doesn't make it not engaging, right? Like you still wanted that experience,
Yes.
which is an incredibly cool thing. Right there.
I was going to say, the experience of being a non-player character in a LARP-type context, I actually act at a Renaissance fair, and we've started incorporating some LARP elements for the younger patrons. And for me, what I'm doing, it's more exhausting than anything else, but I'm definitely in a role, and my role is to facilitate the adventure for the other people, which is satisfying in its own right. And I am still, in a way, a player. I am a character. But what I'm doing, it's not necessarily for the fun or the thrill of the adventure. It's making sure the adventure works for everyone else, while still being an active participant in it.
That is another interesting vector.
Did you have a thought?
No, I have to get the same thought you have, the player versus participant.
And
Is there a difference in that definition?
well, and whether or not in some of these massive multiplayer environments there is an opportunity to be participant that could, because we've never done that in an MMO that I've seen, right?
I'm shopkeeper. That's
Right.
my job. I
Well,
hang out in the MMO thing and I sell
Early
stuff.
on, I mean, you will
Well, Eve does. There's
you
space
will
truckers.
advertise that with you could be someone with big spread, but then it played the heroic trope so heavily that all
Right.
you wanted to do was be the hero.
I was gonna say Star Wars, not
Yeah.
Galaxies.
Yeah.
Was it Galaxies?
Yeah.
The first Star Wars MMO, you had a lot of that too, and people will opt into that role because they want it, and we've never really structurally enabled that beyond. Sure, you can do a trade skill, right?
Right.
Yeah. Eve Online lets you be a space trucker.
Right.
Or spend all day with the screen open watching space.
Well, on the flip side, you can be a stock market dude. Right?
Yeah.
You can spend all day doing nothing but watching graphs do like this.
Yeah.
And that's my game.
Spreadsheets, the game.
Yes.
But how is that
I excel
fun?
at that game, by the way.
Combat Excel.
Oh.
All the way in the back.
One game that I think is really good with playing with these type of things is the original Nier.
Sure. And even the new Nier, I think, does some.
Yes, but the original is my favorite. So, trying to avoid spoilers mostly, but at the end of the original Nier, you have the choice to save a character that you've grown very attached to over the course of the game, and the character you're controlling has grown very attached to. And the interesting thing is that your character has to make a sacrifice, but also you as the player have to make a major sacrifice in the type of way that you don't usually have to in games. So I think it's a really interesting just combination of your feelings as the character and your feelings as like the player of the game.
This happens in Nier 2 as well at the very end. I think we actually should talk. Oh, nice. I think we should talk a tiny bit about that moment because I won't spoil any of the narrative. I'm going to spoil a tiny bit of the mechanics of Nier 2. So, right, if this is going to break your heart, there's a moment at the end of Nier 2 where there's basically a super tough battle and people keep coming to help you. And then you get to the credits and it says, so you have a choice now. You can either continue to play the game, do all the side quests you didn't get to do, all this stuff, or we can effectively upload you to cloud by deleting your save file. You can get rid of your save file forever. All this work that you've done, all this progress, all this, and help other people, right? You can be one of those ships that came and helped you. And it's mind-blowingly powerful, right? And I did it, right? And to this day, I still, like, I didn't finish the game. I didn't do all this other stuff. I'm never going to. And there are, like, New Game Plus vectors that I gave up because I was like, yeah, all these other people's were there with me. I should be there with them. And I have never had that moment of real sacrifice in a game. And so, again, excellent mechanical way to bring me in and to think about mechanics on a vector that we usually don't think about. Deleting my save file is not a game mechanic we usually think of, and yet it's so good. You've had your hand up forever, so yes, right there.
There's a really clever card game that's really old now, I think. It's called A Question of Scruples. But basically you have these cards, and each one of them has moral dilemma on it. And my edition is from the 80s, so like these are really
Nice.
dated at this point. But you all sit in a circle with your friends, and you each have these cards, and you're trying to get rid of the cards. And the way you get rid of the cards is by asking one of your friends in the circle one of these moral dilemmas and guessing how they're going to answer it. And if you guess correctly, if you know your friend that well, you can get rid of your card. Or maybe your friend will lie, but if they lie, you can challenge them. If you think you really know them that well, but if you don't, and they succeed at lying, then they get to get rid of their card. And it's a really clever way to test how well you really know the people that you're in with, and you make a lot of friends that way.
Getting rid of cards, is that to the, out of the game or to the player, to the other
The first
player?
person who gets rid of all their cards wins.
But when I get rid of a card, so I ask a dilemma, I discard.
The discard
Okay,
pile.
all right.
There's, I'm trying to, maybe one of you guys knows, because this is really good, there's a tabletop game out now that's about knowing your partner, right? Like it's about, and I believe you can't verbally communicate, and the win condition.
The Newlywed Game?
Which
No,
one
no,
is this?
I'm
What?
joking.
I'm going to move back to, I'll look it up. I'll see if I can find it on here. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 more quick. Technically, by the way, it is now 12:30. If you've got to get to other things, do it. I have a panel at 1, but since they aren't kicking us out, I'm happy to take another 10 minutes since it's actually been super informative for me hearing all of you guys' thoughts. So yeah, right there in the red shirt, yeah.
The most recent one I've experienced was anyone who's played this year, What Remains of Edith Finch knows exactly the level I'm talking about. That would be the cannery level.
Yes, that was the best part. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, right. So for those who don't know, I think it's safe to say the whole premise of the game is you're going through this house where, long story short, is everyone in the family dies in the house. Their room is sealed up, and so you're going through the house into each room, finding out how they died, usually playing on their last moments, and it's usually told from their perspective or the perspective of another character, but you generally play as them. So the interesting thing about this is about a gentleman who played a lot of games as a form of escapism. He was one of the youngest in his family, so the family was cursed. He dealt with a lot of loss in his life. He works at a fish cannery, beheading fish to be canned. So, I mean, you're playing as a character who you know is going to die, and you're literally taking fish with one hand and sliding them over into a guillotine to decapitate them. At this point, it's not a secret, right, where the game is going. So you know, like, spoiler alert, yet again, this character is going to die by the end, right? But the interesting thing it does is, so you have with one analog stick, you are taking each fish and sliding it into the guillotine, which is a very menial task. You're able to kind of just do it, barely thinking about it, which is kind of the point. Well, then he begins to drift and daydream about getting back to a fantasy world playing games. And it starts with just like a tabletop map with very primitive graphics that you're controlling with the other analog stick, kind of similar to Brothers. And then that thought bubble keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. The graphics become more in-depth, much more elaborate. While meanwhile, you still need to continue to do the fish, else both of these tasks will overlay each other, and the only way to progress is to do both simultaneously. But eventually, you're able to like drift out into it, and it culminates in this point where, as it's narrating, it talks about how he's going to go towards his coronation, and finally the game becomes first person, like you're at this grand celebration, and they really spend a lot of time leading up to this moment where you're walking up the stairs of the coronation to save the princess or prince. They let you choose as well, and you get to the coronation to be crowned, and you realize in this metaphorical world now, it's a guillotine. And so, like, as I played with my girlfriend who didn't play as many. Actually, we did the 30 questions. But I played with her, and she didn't play video games like I did, so she had a different experience. So even it gripped her, but I know for me, like, I had to put the controller down because, like, as someone who like played video games as a form of escapism through middle school, like, everyone, I think a lot of people here in this room can totally represent or relate to this idea of trying to go back to this escapist world and daydreaming as you're going through some menial task day after day after day, and just wanting to get to that world. Although in this case, this character take this to the extreme by they escape out by decapitating.
Well, and I thought it was very interesting that in a video game, it is talking about some of the dangers of escapism within it, which I liked. By the way, the game I was thinking of was And Then They Held Hands, and then we held hands. And it's a game, it's a two-player game where you totally nonverbal communication. And the great thing is, it's about emotional negotiation, but it's also about mechanically on the board. The lose condition is if you ever make a move that prevents your partner from making a move. If your partner can't make a move because of something you did, you both lose, right? And it was just a great mechanic. But yes, pink hair.
I want to bring up Hideo Kojima's Snatcher.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, one thing that they did in the original PC version was they actually coated the disc. I don't know if you know the notes. They coated the disc in a chemical that makes it smell like blood when it burned. So when you put it into the PC, you actually physically smell.
That's fascinating. I actually didn't know that.
I did not know that.
We need more smell games.
Smell-o-vision.
You're right, $1 million idea. Let's just do that.
Step 1, smell game. Step 3, profit. We're in.
The story goes on. It's so story-based that you eventually kind of feel like you are in the protagonist's shoes. That's what I ended up learning so much about it. So that you felt more like you were solving your own mystery of amnesia rather than this character that you don't know.
And I think that narratively Snatcher is a good example. I think that narratively we have done better for longer, right, than we have mechanically. But all the way in the back, because I want to make sure we get to as many people as we can before, yes?
Two examples from tabletop games, Monster Hearts, which is a very adult game, and Mask, which is a significantly less adult game. But both games are about groups of teenagers. Monster Hearts, it's terrible high school drama mixed in with horror. With Masks, it's figuring out who you are and superheroes. But in both games, the basic moves that everybody has access to will usually let you get what you want, but usually at some other cost. In Monster Hearts, it'll let you get what you want, but usually as a consequence, you're adding fuel to the whole spiral of terrible high school drama and sniping and awfulness. In Masks, you might get what you want, but there might be some consequences because you're an inexperienced superhero. At a certain point in the game, after you've gotten enough experience and advancements, you get the ability to take one of those basic moves and get an upgraded, grown-up version. In Monster Hearts, what this lets you do is it gives you access to moves which then allow you to break that cycle of drama. And in Masks, it lets you do things with less risk of stuff going horribly wrong and lets you get more of what you actually want and make stronger declarative statements about who you are. That's really cool.
Oh, God, there's so many. So I want to respond to all of these, but I will keep us silent for the next 2 minutes while I try to rapid fire through these. So yes.
BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. I don't know if I played the DLC.
So BioShock Infinite is narratively a mess. But Burial at Sea, I feel, they drop you in as Elizabeth, and over the course of both parts, and I played them in one big run, especially playing in one big run, you get into the mind of how Elizabeth thinks. And then, does anyone mind spoilers on this one? Yeah, I do. Okay.
All right, so I think that's great because that means we can rapid fire right over there.
I actually have a question for you guys. How do you guys feel that The Last of Us balanced fun and beyond the fun?
So I have some thoughts, but have you played the DLC, by the way?
Yes.
So I think that's where they did it the best.
Yeah. So I have very strong thoughts about that game. It's the first game I played where I understood why people watch other people play video games. And it's the first time where I felt like story was used effectively. And I don't have the breadth of computer game time as many people do, but it was the reward. It wasn't the setup. Right?
Just to riff off of that, I sorry to interrupt you, but I actually didn't play the game. I watched the playthrough of it where it was done as a movie, taking out all the parts where someone failed to jump across the basement or something like that. It was a very effective movie, very effective story that way, and I felt like I didn't need to play it as a result.
And mechanics, since we want to talk about mechanics, the mechanics of lowering the difficulty in the background in that game is genius because it never lets you disengage with the story. Like, if you fail and you fail and you fail and you fail, like, it's a little bit easier each time, you don't know it, you never told it to. It's helpful. I loved it.
Well, I think one of the best things about it is you are fundamentally dependent on another being that you do not have agency over as directly, right? Which is something that it takes. You are not the only hero of this story, which is an important difference to almost all the video game stories, right? And there's value to both of those stories, but I thought that was an incredible thing. This is something I would love to talk about more, but I saw 2 more hands I'm gonna get. In blue shirt, yeah.
Okay, just from the idea you were talking about as games as input and a lack of control sometimes. 2 artists that I think are doing that really well more in the indie scene are Con Gao with To the Moon and Finding Paradise.
Yeah.
And then also Davey with Beginner's Guide.
That was my game.
Beginner's Guide. Sure.
I love both of them. Both of them are friends of mine, so I can't. Yes, you're absolutely correct. They're both fucking awesome.
That's all I want to say.
Yes. All right, right there in the front.
So you're talking about games as metaphor, how video games don't do games as metaphors. I found that the 5-minute flash games tend to do them.
Yes.
Where there's I believe it's called Alone, where you're a dot going along and there are dots avoiding you, and you're trying to get to the end.
Yes.
And there's one with 2 asteroids, one's pink and yellow, and they avoid each other or hit each other.
The End of Us, I believe it's called.
Is that?
Yeah. I was dating the person who made that. The other, for 5-minute flash games, and then I think we should get going, but if you haven't played them, The Majesty of Colors, Every Day the Same Dream, Today I Die, oh God, there's a couple of others. Loved. There's a bunch of really good, just 5-minute flash games where people, because it's a short enough form that people can really experiment and hone down to this, that if you're interested in this sort of thing, look at the experimental flash games, because it's a great place to learn as designers. And here's one mechanic, here's one idea. I mean, loneliness is another one, right? But all right, thank you all for coming down to this. I hope you got something out of it. Thank you, everybody.